Oh yeah. Maybe we're to start with this. Oh yeah. Mike and Max here. We're gonna be talking about traps and treasures today. This is uh this is our first topic to discuss on the show, and I'm not sure we really named the show yet. So there's ideas. We talked about uncommon sense, but then I realized there's about a dozen other podcasts that are
Called
called
that.
Uncommon Sense. Yeah.
I guess
So
that was a pretty common idea.
yeah, yeah. So not an uncommon idea. That's for sure.
We could call the
So
show
today we're
Titty
going to talk about.
Sprinkles. I bet no one has that.
that. No, no one has titty sprinkles. I think that would actually work really well. Max suggested the traps and treasures today. So can you give us a quick synopsis of what you think about traps and treasures?
Well, I can see I'm going to be doing most of the legwork on this podcast, so I will explore this
Well, I'm
idea
gonna.
a little bit further.
Well, you're the one that came up with the idea, so I want to
No,
know
I'm just
what,
messing with you. No, this is
like,
perfect.
what do you mean by traps, and what do you mean by treasures?
Okay, so if
And you
you're
may
a
have to do most of the legwork. We'll see.
well, if you do all the back end stuff, I will literally talk all day. I have more talk than most people have listened, so I can jump right into it.
I would say that's
Basically,
accurate.
the way
Yeah.
I look at it is this. What was that?
I said that's accurate.
Ah! Oh man. Well, anyway, so if you're a gorilla, the traps are like poisonous leaves, and the treasures are edible leaves, pretty much, right? And as you get to be a more complex ape, like you and I are very complex apes, it becomes a little bit more nuanced than that. So you think about the way that human beings live their lives. We try to go toward pleasure away from pain. That's instinctual. But a lot of stuff you don't really know until it's too late that you've actually found yourself in a trap, which is why most traps have something very enticing in them, like the cheese in the mouse trap or like the really shiny coin in a raccoon trap. So I thought we could look at, today it's August
Well, I
2nd.
would say also most good traps, the moment you realize you're in the trap, you try to get out. But getting out like without thinking about how you got in the first place can can make the trap tighter at times.
Yeah, like trying to get out of a spider
First react
web
like
or
great traps are that way. Yeah, yeah,
right. It's like you can go in, but you can't go back out. Right.
yeah.
Um, and I
You have to
think
go
this,
out a different way than you came in.
well, I mean, some traps you just flat out cannot get out of. Right. Once you're in, it's like game over pretty much. Like those humane mouse traps. Have you ever seen those?
Uh-uh. Well, maybe I don't know what's humane,
So
what's not humane when it comes to
well,
trapping mice.
it's a. So I'm thinking like, oh, I don't want to kill the mouse. I'm gonna like set it free in the forest or something like that. And so, unlike the quick death of those inhumane mouse traps, this one is a tiny plastic cylinder where they can smell food but can't eat it. So they're trapped in there for hours and hours and hours until I notice that they've been trapped, which actually seems a little less
Oh yeah,
humane to me when you
yeah.
get down to it. Um, but anyway, so today, uh, in the 2020s, what are the traps and what are the treasures? What are the like sinister things to really be cautious of? Because you don't want to be cautious about everything. That's no way to live. Um, second guessing every step you take and just looking out for phantoms and danger around every corner. So there's a balance to strike there in recognizing what is actually going to harm you or trap you versus what it is something that you just don't need to really worry about.
Well, I would say that if we're just going to talk, it's easy for me to talk about Americans because Well, I think most
I,
people who listen to this show will get that. But uh, mm, most
I think
most
so too.
people
I think so too. We have
most
supercomputers
people
in our pockets. That's our common denominator. Basically, we're all like
that's
in
true.
the future age. So if you don't have a computer, then this podcast is not really going to be for you. Not that you'd be able
Yeah,
to hear it
not
anyway.
relevant. uh, so there's a lot of forgot what I was gonna say.
Okay, let's think about it like this. So, human nature has pretty much not changed for thousands or even hundreds of thousands of years. And we're Homo sapiens, which means we use our brains a lot, neocortex a ton. We are planning probably further into the future than any other animal that I can understand. I mean, I don't know the planning tendencies of a 500-year-old quahog, but I imagine that we are planning way further into the future and at greater complexity than all the other creatures. So I think that's one of the
Say
places
we're
that people,
daydreaming more, at least,
yeah,
like real
we're we're
planning.
we're projecting.
I think
We're
the
projecting into
potential.
the future.
Yeah,
Right.
that's
I,
accurate.
yeah, I refer to it as the probability. So it's like a probability tree of what you think will happen next. And people unconsciously do this all the time. They're like, oh, they're not necessarily giving a numerical figure like, oh, if I do squats today, there's a 4% chance that I will hurt myself and a 94% chance that I will be stronger the next day. But inherently, we know when we go into a set of exercises what we're predicting, what will happen next. And the same thing is true when you decide what kind of exercise plan to follow or which coach to listen to or what stock to purchase. So we're always, I mean, the brain is amazing with how many calculations it can make per second. I think it's something like, I'll get the number wrong, so you guys can fact check me, but I think it's like 11,000 different calculations per second, which is pretty crazy when you think about it. A lot of that is happening beneath the surface, of course. But anyway, so we take those things into consideration that we are probably the most paranoid animals there are. So you don't want to spend your life looking out for traps, but you want to be aware of what can easily trap you. So we come back to our nature, which is pretty much unlimited curiosity, total paranoia. And that combination is what makes some things really hard to stop doing. So when a compulsive behavior gives you a result that you don't want, and the first thing I think about is the pyramid of social media. And you know that I've had a really interesting relationship with social media. I've made tons of money by using it. And I've also taken long extended breaks, like multi-year breaks from it, because I know that what's happening is there are a few people at the tip top of the pyramid who use it as the greatest leverage tool ever. You can send a message out with electrons. You don't need to put it on paper even. You just and it's out there. And then just like how gambling, there's a top tier who makes tons of dough, and then everyone else at the bottom is just lost in this addiction where they actually lose more than they gain from it. And I think that's what's happening right now is we're getting this weird evolution where the top fraction of a percent is using it as a leverage tool, and the bottom majority is essentially becoming ensnared by it. It's more of a trap
Yeah,
because they end up as a net consumer and they don't actually use it for its leverage purposes. They are only leveraged by it. So you have this kind of gambling type of mechanism where you develop myopia or like tunnel vision, and you're now relegated to having an attention span that is equal to one telephone screen at a time. And that's probably the biggest trap because unlike a, a drug addiction or um, a food addiction, there's no evidence of what has taken place except for the reduced attention span. That is really hard. There's no visible uh, evidence of what's going on. So you're becoming psychologically um, trapped, psychologically damaged by this
Say
story
psychologically
time roulette
conforming.
wheel. Well, I mean, you
Yeah,
won't
I mean
have.
the what I mean
Go ahead.
repetition of words. You hear the same words over and over and over again, they become more believable. So when you hop on social media and you're seeing the same message over and over and over again, you're I think a lot of times people's uh, logic in the very beginning is this isn't centrally controlled. This is from my, I'm getting people think they're getting more diverse information than they actually are. And I mean, they talked a lot about that this past year with echo chambers and all that stuff.
That's
But
exactly what I was thinking, is that you build your own echo chamber based on the responses that you give to what you're being fed. It's funny they call it the feed,
yeah,
right?
you create the algorithm. Is the whole point of the algorithm is to keep you engaged longer, and so whatever's going to keep you there. So whether, a lot of times it's sensational stuff, but it's probably not stuff that flies in direct opposition to your beliefs all the time. It may be, you're going to be surrounded with information that's going to, ride that line and keep that going. So it's interesting to watch technology dictate consciousness, dictate where's people's attention is going. Uh, this makes me think about the attention economy. There's a book called that, I believe, and Vaynerchuk talks about this quite a bit. But like that's really what all these tech companies are fighting over is your attention. And when I really realized that, I started thinking about where's my attention going from moment to moment. I talk about thinking. I think about attention as the resource we could be focused on over time, because where your attention is over time is really going to dictate your results. And um, so the attention piece is something I find I can actually direct. Time is this is actually more conceptual than attention. When I can think about attention and I'm having the experience of it. Time is a measure, it's different. So I like to put my so when we talk about this, Um, are you familiar with the triune brain theory?
The pardon?
Triune brain theory.
Triune.
Three part
Three
brain?
un. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
So
lizard, mammal, neocortex.
that's exactly right. And the reptilian brain is all survival and mostly physical world survival. And then you have the mammalian brain, which is the emotional world. That's social constructs. That's the primary question of that part of the brain is, am I loved? So the reptilian brain is, am I safe? Am I loved? Do people does my tribe accept me? And then beyond that is the neocortex, the human brain, where reason, being rational, logic, imagination, language, this all emerges in that that frontal lobe. And the people who, like you said, are the ones that have the most leverage, they're very much so in their human mind. They're in the human brain. They're not experiencing physical scarcity um, the same way that other people are. They may not be. They either already feel loved or have confidence or are really well developed emotionally, or they're sociopath or a psychopath where that part of their being just isn't online. And there's a lot of research to show that there's a lot of people in power who that's the case. I'm looking at my audio right now. I don't see my audio popping up.
I see it over here.
Yeah. Okay.
I see your little
My
bumpy,
squiggles.
bumpy squiggles.
Yeah. So when I think about that, is like when we, especially we look at the last year and a half, and we look at the traps that people get in. What I think, one of the frames that I operate from to make sure I don't fall into traps and that I am going towards treasures, which as I'm saying it out loud, I'm even realizing where I'm going. Wow, I've really gone after treasures, but I haven't been that good at that. But I've been very good at avoiding common traps. And when I see that everybody else is going one direction, I immediately ask, like, all right, everyone's doing that. It's probably wrong. They're probably
You a
being leveraged.
contrarian?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like I look at it, and yeah, it's definitely a personality trait, and there's a rebellious nature that comes along with it. But as I get older, I'm seeing the gift and the shadow of it. But the gift of it is, oh, everybody, is gonna go. Like I watch cryptocurrency. When a certain person decides they want to buy cryptocurrency and they start engaging in the marketplace, and the I'll call them mainstream people. When the mainstream person starts getting involved in cryptocurrency is when I pull out. So that's one of my signals, is I'll be talking to people who've never invested before, just average people that when they start going, I'm going to get in the game, I go, cool, it's time to get out because this is about to get funky.
It's like when you
And
see tons of ads about get rich in real estate with no money down. You're like, okay.
yeah, yeah. Or right now, like everyone's walking around. I'm in Austin. Everyone's walking around, and everyone's trying to buy houses, and everyone's trying to do this and that. And I go, yeah, I'm just gonna let it cool off. I'm not really interested in buying right now. We're at the peak of a bubble. And people go, really? You think so? And the fact that most people don't think we're in a bubble, like really, I go, oh, okay, well, I'm making the right decision.
It's so
People who
hard
are
to pick
normally pretty
tops and
smart.
bottoms. It's so hard to pick tops and bottoms.
It's
But to your
it
point,
is very
though,
hard, but
when
when
you
it's cheaper
see
to build a
the
home than to buy a home.
right, it's like when you see the retail investor start getting into something, like they don't know anything about stocks or crypto or whatever, and they're like, "Yeah, I'm gonna start buying all this stuff," and that's usually the clue that you're nearing that peak.
Yeah. Yeah, so what are some common traps that you're I want to talk about treasures as well. But I think, yeah, well, in regard to treasures, I really, in this day and age, we have an infinite amount of information. So we have like a whole new asset class. So, which is digital assets,
Mm,
where that it's to be able to even conceive of a digital asset as something that is infinitely abundant, like information,
mm.
is it's a very human brain thing to even try to consider. And people who are in that reptilian or mammalian brain where the survival and acceptance is their primary, where their attention is primarily focused, when those people are, I think, are the most likely to get trapped and not enjoy the treasures, um, of abundance, because they're so worried about the physical world, which is where there tends to be more scarcity.
Yeah. And the average person has so many ideas that have been implanted into them and that are now embedded into their psyche. And they think, oh, if I do this, then I will be loved. If I do this, I will be loved. If I do this, then I'm bad or something like that. And the
Yeah, they have
ratio,
reasons for everything.
well, you know me, I like the busy badge and the certificate of suffering. Those are two of the worst possible virtues, I think, but they're some of the most common ones. People have this idea that's been
Yeah,
implanted into them, and humans are mostly nurture. there's some of the instinct intact, but without nurture, we don't even have language. So everything language based is nurtured into us.
Yeah.
We're blanks. You know, you can become a successful businessman or a child soldier with the right nurturing. I mean, that's what's so crazy, right? So you have these virtues like suffering or busyness, and those are really tough traps to get out of. I mean, I know people in their 80s who still have that baggage that if they're not always doing something, then they're like lazy. And I'm thinking, holy hell, that's all human history has done is try to enable greater leisure and laziness. Farming, tools, tractors, computers, all this stuff is to free up our time so we can enjoy more leisure. But then you have this weird virtue switch embedded into you that busy is good and suffering is good. Those are kind of like foundational traps within your psyche that will make you more likely to do a lot of things that either harm you or are just wasting your opportunity to feel safe and to feel loved and to engage in some leisure.
I find that, I mean, we also live in a consumerist society where people tend to think about what they can afford as what can they afford monthly. It's like, oh, can I afford a $700 a month car note? Yeah, yeah, that fits in my budget. So those people end up getting. That's one reason people have a hard time finding leisure, right? It's a self-sabotaging. Not being able to think that far in the future, or choosing not to think that far in the future, is self-sabotaging and puts people on this hamster wheel. So when the trap of consumerism is, I've committed to this mortgage payment, this car note, and this and that. And I'm actually going through a financial course right now, and they brought up an interesting point, which is if you max out what the bank will allow you to borrow for a home, and if you max out what the bank will allow you to get for a car, you're already over leveraged. You're already maxed out, and most people do that. Plus, they have credit cards, or student loan debt, or whatever you want to call it,
Well,
no other things.
I would humbly
So that
suggest
that
that
makes it hard to have leisure too, because people are just having to work, or at least feel like they need to.
yeah, I would humbly suggest that the overwhelming majority of people prioritize the exact wrong things, and they're trying to keep up with the Joneses, and the desire to impress before you can support is foolish. Most of the things that actually increase your quality of life, like sharing a meal with someone you care about, sharing a conversation with someone you care about, going for a walk, exercising, playing a game. That stuff is basically free. So all of the other stuff is this desperate attempt to be loved through the extension of material goods. And not only will that not actually work and leave you feeling quite hollow, it may attract the wrong types of relationships and take away more from your time. So then you're really stuck on this ride with pretty much no chance of getting out of it. So when you think about building wealth, there are really only two ways to do it. You can reduce your costs and you can increase your revenue, or you can increase your profit. And what's funny is when it comes to searching for treasure, which we are all intrinsically treasure hunters, you don't even need to strike gold that many times as long as you don't act like an idiot with the treasure that you have actually gotten. If you really dedicate yourself to even like one good idea in your life and you strike gold, that can be enough. But if you are constantly feeding the machine, because look, advertising works. I'm just as susceptible as anybody else, which is why I have all ads blocked. I actually have a special browser for when I want to see ads, just to see what people are doing, because I never see an
Which
advertisement.
which browser do you at? What browser are you using to block ads?
Uh, I mean, Chrome, Firefox, it doesn't matter. Like I have it set up so I just
Oh,
use
you can use it. Okay, there's settings in there.
yeah, I mean, you get it all set up with an app, but I never see an ad normally. I have to specifically set myself up just to be like, I wonder how people are advertising. And what's really funny is if you don't see ads, you don't really want stuff.
Yeah, 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 man.
So that's a big trap.
I'm with you. I ditched a TV back in 2013, and yeah, my accumulation of stuff went down after that for sure. Uh, okay, so that being one of the traps. So how do we turn that into a treasure? I think that we can always, if we look at the other side of the coin, a trap and a treasure. Like
Hmm.
how do you do that? What in this?
Are we still talking accumulation of stuff?
Yeah, like okay, how do we get out of this trap of accumulating shit? All right, so blocking ads is one of them.
That's a huge help. Uh, I think accumulation of stuff is a way that people try to feel safe. So letting some of that stuff go. And I think the treasure is less but better. Start thinking about what items you use on a daily basis, what items you use on a weekly basis. And I went through this whole thing where I was trying to only own 1,000 items. And then I got to the garage with all my tools and I was like, this is over. I'm not doing this. I just can't do it because I like building stuff in the garage. It's a little workshop. But the the items that really bring you the most benefit are probably going to be only a few things. A good pair of shoes, a nice pair of pants, or a couple nice pairs of pants. But the idea of maximization through reduction. So you have fewer things, but better. You have one really good pocket knife instead of like 15 crappy ones. And you think about I like to think about stuff like like Russian dolls. You know those Russian dolls?
Yeah,
The It builds upon.
I think it's babushka. Babushka is what they're called. Something like that.
Is it? I know
Anyways,
that's like a term of endearment. My little
now
babushka.
babushka is like a
Anyway, so the
grandmother,
nesting,
but
the nesting dolls.
yeah,
So I think about it in terms of if I only have a backpack, what goes in the backpack? If I only have one carload of stuff, what goes in the car? If I only have one house worth of stuff, what goes in the house? And you start to realize what the core essentials really are. And going camping can be really beneficial for that too, realizing how much you actually need for your continued survival. And it's, air, water, food, safety, rest, play, love, that kind of stuff. It's not that many
yeah.
things. So I think that's the
Well,
treasure
2018,
is less but better.
yeah, 2018, I did the nomadic thing, which when you go nomadic, the minimalism thing pretty much has to come online unless you're a sultan, like a royal sultan, and you're going to have people carrying your stuff along and setting up in your suite wherever you're arriving. Sounds expensive. So
I kind of
yeah, I
like
got
the
down to
idea of
two
that though.
bags. Well, of course, yeah. If it's easy, that sounds
Setting
like
up a
it could
tent.
be. Yeah, like well, you have to have people like just doing everything all the time.
Yeah.
Anyways, uh, got down to two bags. I had the amount of stuff I had aside from a few art pieces and a couple plants. Everything would fit into two bags. So I had a backpack and a duffel, and I probably had between the backpack and the duffel, I probably had 110 liters between the two of them. So
That's awesome.
not a
What'd
lot.
you learn from
So I
that?
had that for a
What'd you
year and
learn
a
from that?
half. Oh, I just, you know what? One of the things that made it easy is I was always traveling, so I didn't feel like I needed new clothes. I find
Yeah.
that when I'm in one spot very long and I'm mixing it with people all the time, I'm like, "Ah, I wore this already. I wore this already. I need to put on." So it actually, there was like little things in there that made it easier.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. It goes to show that I didn't realize how much value I put on clothes until recently. I started running. I was tightening up my budget. I was like, wow, okay. I spent how much on clothes in the last 3 months? Why am I spending that much on clothes?
Mm.
And so when I haven't done that in a while, and I was like, oh, I've been in one spot, and I don't want to be seen wearing the same things. I'm like, you, I'm such an egotistical motherfucker, and
You?
it's good to spot that and go, okay, yeah. Uh, but I did that for a year and a half, and then I spent another year and a half only having what would fit into a Toyota Tacoma, a pickup truck. So everything I own would be in there for another year and a half. And so now I moved into a house in February, and it's been very easy to only accumulate things that I really love, that are really, really meaningful. But I don't think that would have been possible had I not gone ultra minimalist and nomadic for a period of time. I think having that space to reprogram my mind, because I was just such an accumulator before I made some of those moves.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest treasures that people have available to them is the ability to change very quickly. And it's also one of the scariest things because our ego is like, we're this. Okay, I feel stable. I feel permanence because, this is the story we've got and I'm like this. But the fact that we can just turn on a dime and flip to something completely different is a crazy superpower that is basically unique to human beings. And so I love change all at once. I don't like to I don't like to baby step it. I like to just go, you know what? I've
Hmm.
been overeating. Now I'm going to eat nothing for a week. Oh, I've been drinking 6 ice cream coffees every day. Now I'm going to go to 0. And I think every time I do something like that, I feel like that superpower, that quantum realization of, oh my God, I really can do anything. Like all the, I can be whatever I want to be when I grow up, that kind of thing. I still haven't grown up, but I assume that I can still be what I want to when I grow up. Uh, so I think to your point, having those rapid changes can be everlasting until you decide to switch things around the next time. So it can be good to just jump into the cold water out of your comfort zone because you'll experience a lot of stuff that you may never be able to experience any other way.
Yeah, and you're way more plastic. You're more adept to change than you think you are. I'm more adept to change than I like to think I am.
Well, because our
Right?
ego is trying to
I
block
think
that
the average.
change all the time.
Totally, totally.
That's all it does.
Yeah, the ego
We
doesn't
just
want
want
things to
to
change.
we just want to have a foundational story that says, I am like this. I am this type of a person. I have this many widgets in my garage. These are my friends. This is the food I like. This is the restaurant I like. And we just want to try to concretize and solidify that story so that we feel more stable in this construct of time. Because I remember reading in this book, the ego exists in time, not in space. And I thought that was a really good one. So it's just trying to clarify.
Can you explain that more?
No, I mean, sure, I'll try. uh, so the ego is
What does
our
that
our
mean to
story.
you?
the ego is our story of ourselves, and it exists within the timeline of our lives, but it's not something that is spatially relevant. I have this body and I'm having these sensations, but the ego is totally irrelevant in the now unless you decide that it is relevant. So it's basically just your perception of self through time and memories that you bring forward with you, but
Right.
it's not
If you're
something that
being
takes up any
present,
space.
yeah, if you're being present in the moment, ego is going to be can't be there. Is that what you're saying?
It's kind of like that untethered soul idea where you're not really
Hmm.
living in your own story, you're just being fully present, like you said, that be here now idea where you get those temporary breaches out of this sea of consciousness into this being part of this greater experience.
Yeah. Well, I like to think about ego. I mean, it's your narrative. It's your which is your identity, right? Like I like to use the word ego and identity interchangeably. And
Identity is probably a better word to
one of the
use.
things I think,
I would
yeah,
agree.
I like to use the word identity because I think it's easier for people to agree on what that even means. Whereas when someone says ego, people have all these preconceived notions that are different.
And it makes you feel
Like
defensive.
Eckhart Tolle, yeah, yeah, Eckhart
Because it's
Tolle,
like
like
I'm not an
his version of
egotistical guy.
ego. Yeah, yeah, okay. Yeah, Eckhart Tolle versus Sigmund Freud are gonna describe ego differently. And
Right.
I think most people grow up with the idea of the Sigmund Freud ego, maybe a little bit. Um, but then if they read one Eckhart Tolle book, and now they really know what ego is. But identity is identity is really I find to be really useful. And uh, you said something earlier that triggered this for me, which is when we're little kids and our parents look at us or a teacher looks at us and says, "You can be whatever you want when you grow up. What do you want to be?" And what does that child say? They'll be like, "Oh, firefighter, astronaut, president, construction worker." Like they use a noun to describe what it is that they're becoming, right? Because there's this concept of there's a finish line that you're going to be complete when you reach this thing. And so even from that really young age, the idea of identity as a noun and the way it's built into the language is um, as a noun makes it so static. And I find that when we tend to get attached to the identity, right? And because
We like
the
that
attachment,
stability.
yeah, the attachment creates security. Is
And we're the
it's a
ultimate
false security.
specialists. Well, and we're the ultimate specialists. So if you want to do well, usually that's the way to do it. It's to be a specialist surgeon, it's to be a firefighter. It's just the same way that ants split off into there are worker ants and there are soldier ants. So it's like trying to choose which of these hundreds or thousands of specialties a human being wants to be. A human being, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Being the but I think there's a problem with this whole thing around like this is who I am, and thinking and wanting to stake, really stake it a flag in the ground instead of seeing identity as a verb, seeing it as a process, and really to me I went through this practice of shifting from one identity to another one, and then getting to where really realizing and saying I can hold multiple identities at once. I mean, one would be like, oh, I'm a CEO of a company, but I'm also a son to my mother, right? Like I can hold both of these at the same time.
Well, like
And then
when you meet
in one
somebody,
instance, I'm acting like, what's that?
when you meet
Oh,
somebody, what do you ask? You're like, "Oh, what do you do?" and they say what they
Yeah,
do.
totally.
And that's what we ask. What do you do? Not like
I
we
hate that
don't usually
question.
say we don't usually say something like, "Oh, well, I like cycling and hiking and play parcheesi on the weekends," or whatever it is. It's always what's your
Yeah.
profession,
I
because that's also a signal that we use to determine if, oh, this person's a good person. This person is a doctor.
yeah.
Oh, you're a lifeguard. How mysterious. There's like a lot there's a lot tied into that career. So in a certain
Yeah.
sense, our value to the tribe is based on our career.
Mhm. Well, that's that emotional. It's that emotional brain, that the mammalian brain that the primary question that it concerns itself with is, "Am I loved?" And I think when you're a child, you start going, "I can be whatever I want. I'm going to choose something that people love, so that I'll be accepted and all this and that." And I don't remember why we got down this track, but I think maybe one of the traps is having a static identity and having a hard time changing it. We were talking about change and how
Right.
what
And
keeps us from being able to access that change is a commitment to an identity that is really just, from what I've noticed, identity. Have you ever watched Westworld?
uh,
No.
only bits and pieces of the first season many years ago. It's been a long time.
So like that movie is, it talks a lot about consciousness because there's a lot to do with robots who appear to be human, and there's this whole discussion around that the robots actually think that they're human, um, and don't know that they're robots, and there's this self-directing awareness that's happening. Maybe we're not sure who it is that's energizing and creating the will of the robots when they start making decisions that they weren't programmed to do. Um, and one of the things that they talk about in that movie, and I think a variation of this is good to think about, which is uh, uh, beliefs create. I want to say, was it beliefs create the identity, and shit. I'm trying to remember what created the beliefs, or maybe identity creates. It's like the beliefs create the identity, and the identity is this or that, and there's certain situations that create that.
Well, who
Anyways,
implanted those? Who implants those beliefs? I think is what we're talking about, and the way we can relate it back to childhood and upbringing is it's very unlikely that a child will have enough self-confidence and self-awareness to do what they intrinsically enjoy versus what gets them a positive love response. So
totally.
pretty much we just do what will get us love. Even one of my favorite comedians, George Carlin, talks about how as a kid he would he would be funny, and all of the adults would give him attention and admiration, and those were the only A's that he was interested in. He just wanted their attention and their admiration, and I think that's what we mostly do. And I did the same thing in my life because I mean, I didn't even have any clue who I was or why I was doing the things that I was doing. There was so much momentum built around, I'll just do whatever people like, which was cracking jokes and being athletic. Those were two really good things. So if I could crack jokes and be a good athlete, people would automatically have to like me. And I just kept going down that thing. And as a strength and conditioning coach and gym owner, author, all that stuff, I was in this loop where I would share a little bit of my training, and people would be like, "Wow, look how strong he is," and I'd be like, "Oh, they like it when I'm strong, so I guess I'll just get a little stronger." And so everything was
Yeah.
built around this feedback loop. So I get some love, I get a little stronger, I get some more love, get a little stronger. And my guess is that anybody listening to this would be able to recognize where that happened in their own life in terms of doing what is uh, going to get them positive attention versus doing what is intrinsically enjoyable. And this might be the greatest trap of all because it runs parallel to what we discussed earlier about buying a bunch of items to give yourself the appearance that you are, you know, doing better than the Joneses. And it's still for that same reason. And so please give me love. We want to be safe. And as soon as we're safe, we're like, we want love. And if we can't get love, we'll like, fine, give me power. And if we can't get that, we'll be like, fine, give me attention. Because the worst thing to be is stuck in this vacuum of a black hole with no feedback whatsoever. And that explains the internet trolls or any kind of trolls like haters and stuff like that. They just want some attention. But if you don't give them attention, then they eventually just go away. It's pretty interesting. We get stuck
I've got a
doing
troll.
things
I've
that
got a
seem
troll.
good.
I've got a troll. I've had a troll for like a year and a half, maybe longer,
Amazing.
who gets no feedback but responds to every single one of my emails. And
That's amazing. Still on
attacking
your
me.
email list.
Yeah, dude, still on my email list. And then attacking me. He set up a fake Instagram account and started
Yes.
commenting and leaving. And I ended up
Wow.
just blocking him. And then it happened a couple times. And then I think he got hip to the idea that I wasn't gonna just let dumb shit happen on my Instagram comments.
Hmm.
And then so it is interesting. Most trolls will go away if you leave them alone. This guy, holy shit, man. He also tracks all my friends on Instagram, so he'll like write an email back and like whoever I was hanging out with last week, he'll make a comment about them. It's it's really interesting.
That guy is really
He's
hurting,
obsessed.
clearly. No, he's hurting. I mean,
Yeah, yeah, for
we
sure.
think about the trap side of things. You never know what's going on in somebody else's life. That's why it's important to be aware of what's going on and see things for what they are. But it's really important not to judge people and say, "Oh, that's like an evil bad person," because you never know. Like maybe he was abused, or maybe he wasn't. Maybe he was treated fine and needed to be abused a little bit more. Some people are jerks because
Yeah.
they never
Well, do
saw
you,
any retribution. Where like just a few ass kickings would have totally diverted the course of that person's life. It's kind of like in the animal kingdom, you have the cubs or the young ones who just try to like push the boundaries of the old male, and then there's usually nothing, but then they go over the line and the old male like swats them or bites them or something like that, and then it's over, it's done. It's this self-correcting type of nurture. So I wonder about that sometimes, especially with regard to communication over the internet. I call it drone strike discourse because there's so much distance between you and the target that you would do unspeakable things that you would never do one on one. Like the difference between strangling a guy and, sending a drone strike to kill the same guy. I don't know. I haven't done either myself, but I would imagine it would be
well,
easier to drone
I
strike somebody than strangle somebody. That seems personal,
I
strangling.
I mean, I've thought about this. This was something like, I was in the Navy, so this ended up being a conversation. It's you're sitting down with your buddies and you go, all right, well, okay, you're gonna like if a kid comes after me, you're gonna shoot him, right? Like, say he's 8 years old and he's armed with an AK,
You got
and I
to.
want to know that you're not gonna pussy out on me. So getting these conversations about uh, the necessity to kill somebody at some point, and
Hmm.
I got really deep into it. I also read this book called On Killing, which
I
is
have that
like
book too.
basically. Do you? Yeah, I read that.
Yeah.
Man, I read that when I was in the Navy. It was interesting, and pretty much the book points out that most average functioning human beings don't want to kill anybody. uh, like like no one actually wants to kill people. Um, but there's ways of convincing people to kill somebody for the greater good. Um, and
The
the
greater good.
the U.S. military has done a great job of that. But what I found in those conversations is like the idea of like I started thinking like playing out in my mind how I different situations I might kill somebody, and the idea of stabbing someone or slicing their throat versus shooting them with a gun, even that in itself feels, it's like, oh wow, if you stab somebody to death, that's personal. Yeah, that's personal. A gun, even if it's 10 feet away, less personal, right? I might not
Way
even get any
less.
blood on me.
Way less.
Yeah, and so the idea of now we go from stabbing somebody all the way to drone strike. You got an
Hmm.
operator sitting in Oklahoma, basically playing a video game, and
Yeah.
and killing somebody in whatever country. Not gonna name any countries. I don't want to trigger anybody. But the it's an interesting thing. Um, I think in that case, yeah, I mean that's a whole other can of worms. I don't know if we want to get into
Well,
that on
it's
this
two
show.
different methods. It's two different methods of communication. It's verbal communication and it's physical communication. And that's really the only way we can resolve our differences. And what's funny though, in both cases, the gamble is to prevent death. Isn't that funny? Because even though you're going, in the military to go kill another guy, the only reason you're doing that is because you think that that is going to result in less death. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah,
You think you
yeah,
are preserving life through killing.
yes,
So, so
yeah, yeah. You're
that's
making
what
the
we're
world a better place. Well,
and not
yeah. I
not
mean,
just better, but less death. We got to kill those guys before they kill us because they're going to, kill us worse or something like that. It's such funny bargains, right?
yeah. Well, people also, I mean, going back to the identity piece, you have the cultural identities, and yeah, there's this belief that one group is better than another group of people. Even
Mm,
inside my own company, if we look at other companies that offer a similar product or service, everyone on my team is like, yeah, they're probably pretty good, but they're not doing as good as we are, and
mm,
we should get their clients if there's an opportunity to do that, because we'll actually serve them better, and
right.
and I think that happens. Definitely patriotism is such it's an interesting illusion for people to get really tied into.
Well,
Um,
you have to have some sort of fealty to your group, and
well, well,
it's
I'm
just
not
when the
opposed to
groups get
that.
really big. When the groups get really big, it's so difficult to have a unifying idea, and that's why religion is still around. Is otherwise, nations and religions are the only way so far for huge groups of people. I think it's called the Reynolds number or something like that, to get past like 200 people in a group, because otherwise the structure of that group just completely falls apart. So you need this unifying idea,
Well, Dunbar's
like
number is
God.
150.
Dunbar, that's not Reynolds number. I don't know why I said
Dunbar,
Reynolds number.
and it's yeah, Dunbar 150. Yeah, yeah. A church,
Yeah.
the average church, once it hits 150, the structure starts to break down.
Well, but if you believe in the same
Unless they
God
have
as
a
the
more
church,
advanced hierarchy.
well, and if you believe in the same tree spirit or God as the village next door, then you guys have that common ground where you go, oh yeah, we're on the
Yeah.
same team, you know, same same colored hats or same colored armbands, whatever.
Totally.
You know,
uh,
that's probably the biggest trap. Just to kind of tie it back into what we're talking about. When people start wearing the same outfits, you probably want to start watching out for those guys.
it's time to bounce. Time to bounce. Yeah. I I mean, I, I get a little curious about the mask wearing in that case. Is like it's like are you in or are you out? Like are you a masker or an anti-masker? And
It's divide and conquer
there's a
tactics, per usual. I mean,
yeah
the problem is the psyches of people have been abused for so long that it's kind of like the boy who cried wolf. You know, so now whether
yeah
there's a real threat or imagined, you have already alienated such a huge percent of the like. I don't watch the news. Um, Everything I understand about being a rational thinker leads me to believe that the news is nothing but lies and propaganda. So it's hard because now I don't know what is definitely true. But I I heard someone say if if you don't watch the news, they say that you're uninformed. But if you do watch the news, then you're misinformed. So what the hell am I going to choose? And I guess that's for each individual to decide. Would you rather be uninformed or misinformed? I'd rather be uninformed because there's enough that you can do to enrich your life that's actually within your control that requires your
yeah. I think this
focus
goes
and
back to the
attention.
quality conversation.
Mm.
We weren't calling it quality, but we were talking about having less things, having fewer things, but the things that we do have being more meaningful. Um, and I think the same thing applies to information. In a world of
Oh,
abundant
yeah.
information, it's like I think that a lot of people they listen to authority or what they perceive to be authority in lieu of decision making their own decisions and collecting the evidence and all that. There's a book you read. I'm sure you've read Influence by Robert Cialdini.
Cialdini. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and you know what he talks about in that book is uh, when somebody when they get to the point where they believe that they cannot uh, uh, decipher the information for themselves. They immediately look for the authority. They look for a uniform or a lab coat. Like if it's a medical thing, they're looking for the doctor. They're looking for school teachers, police officers, politicians. These are preachers. You know, anyone who is in the who are in these authority positions in your mind. You start going, oh, well, I'll just do what they say, and I think that's um, one of the things that people have done and being misinformed is people will watch the news, they'll watch the media, but the quality of that information is so poor. Like you were saying, they're misinformed. The information is so poor. And so what I've done in the last year and a half, which I realized is I've been very sad because I noticed that there's very few of us who are going to do this, which is I go gather a bunch of information and I believe because I believe that I can accumulate enough of the right information and make sense of it that I can make a good decision for myself. So I've been
Yeah.
very like there is no and I think this takes a good deal of personal work for an individual to get there is I'm not sure I could be in that position if I actually thought there was an authority outside of myself, beyond the laws of nature, right? The only to me the only authority is the laws of nature. Everything else is a fucking illusion, and the idea that people are unwilling to or they don't believe that they can actually decipher the information. They can't create the context they need to make a choice.
And in a
And
lot of cases, they can't because the language is deliberately complex. I mean,
well,
people
that's where
often
they're
ask me, what would I do if I were king for a day? And it would be require any rules to be in clear and simple language that a fifth grader could understand. I mean, that's part of
yeah
the reason that it's so easy to manipulate people. But I think to
yeah
tie it
there's
back together, it's about what you give your attention to. I have this funny little thing that I had written on my wall for a long time, and it's the power of any god is proportional to its believers. And what's funny is the mathematical symbol for proportional is the same as the little Jesus fish. And so I
uh
consider God. I isn't that funky? So I consider God whatever you believe in
yeah
without proof. Anything you believe in without proof is basically a god like figure. It's dependent on faith. So the power of any god is based on the believers. So you can think of money as a modern god. You can think of the government as a modern god. You know, you believe that they do everything
yeah, a
in
god,
the
not
best
the god.
possible interest. Right, a god. I mean, it's funny, you know, where people are so adamant there's no god, there's only one god, or the Hindus are like there's 6,000 or so gods or 12,000 gods. I mean, ultimately, what we're talking about with traps and treasures is you have to protect your attention above all else, because within that is where you will be trapped. It's like, you know, the oldest trick in the book is like, look over there, yoink. So you have to be really cautious of what you give your attention to, because you essentially make that your God. And it takes away
Yeah,
the time for you to go treasure hunting.
yeah. I like to think about it as what do you worship? Wherever your attention, wherever you spend the most attention, is what you worship the most. And
Yeah,
we
and you
all
give power
worship
to it.
something.
Yeah, you give power to it.
Yeah, yeah. I think we should wrap it up right there. We're at
I
the
like it.
hour, and I've enjoyed this conversation. Let's do this again next week. And whether we talk about this or not, I'm going to mention it as a hook so that people will make sure they tune in for the next one. But I'd like to dig into values, beliefs, and behavior uh, next
Love it.
week. I
We
think
can
that'd be a
talk
lot of
about the
fun.
difference between
Yeah.
morals and ethics too.
Oh yeah, perfect. Ooh, morals and ethics. Jeez. All right, that's going in the book. Um, we're organized over here. Been doing this for a while. We can make this work. I say that, and then I showed up to the show today, not remembering the show the traps and treasures. You had to remind me. That's how organized
Yeah,
I am.
I think this is a good partnership. I think I'm very excited to make this a regular thing, and I think anybody who listens is in for a pretty wild ride.
Yeah, this is the first conversation, and the reason we did this is because every time we get on the phone, it's just a constant back and forth of I don't know what I find to be intellectually stimulating. So I imagine that other people would find that to be true as well.
And I feel
So
like we picked a good topic to start with because, like, you know, suicide and cannibalism are a little too heavy for episode one, I think.
yeah, we'll get to that eventually. Probably in the first 10. First 10.
I think that'll be episode
Uh,
three.
all right. How do we wanna finish these off? Yeah. And we wanna wrap these. Um oh yeah. Okay. Here we go. Max, where can they find you? Are you posting on Instagram again?
Yeah, sometimes. MaxShank.com at MaxShank. I'm easy to find.
And you're so fortunate you got your name. I couldn't get my name, the domain for mine, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Some old author dude. Yeah, you can find me on Instagram, Mike underscore Bledsoe. And yeah, we'll just leave it at that. Find me there. All other things come from and are posted in there most of the time. Thanks, y'all.